So, to catch everybody up, I want to take this old Saab, convert it into a race car and hopefully compete with it in the 24-hour race on the Nürburgring. Now, the first and obvious question to ask is, why the hell would you take a Saab? Let's be honest here, a BMW would probably be a much better base. There's a massive aftermarket, it is proven on the Nordschleife, it has won several instances of the 24-hour race back to back. And the same goes for a lot of other makers. Honda, Porsche, Ford, all of these would be more logical choices. And then there's the elephant in the room, or rather the elephant's carcass, because Saab is a dead brand. It's been out of production since 2014 and nobody's heard of them ever since. So why would you take a car that has no manufacturer support, zero availability of factory spare parts, and a small or non-existent aftermarket for tuning parts and make it into a race car? Well, the answer to that question might be more based than you initially think. First and foremost, I have a lot of personal reasons for this car. I am a Saab person, I would say. My very first project was a 1986 Saab 900 Saloon in a cherry red color, and it being my first project, it taught me how to wrench and how to fix cars and how to actually disassemble and reassemble something in a way that it works afterwards. But more than that, it also taught me project management. It taught me how long things can take, how many setbacks you can actually encounter in just one simple task. At least you thought it was a simple task. And this has made me kind of endeared to Saab and their spirit, their way of building cars. Now, the 900 first generation is a very different car than the car I'm sitting on here right now, which is a 900 second generation. The engine's in there the wrong way around, tilted 45 degrees to the side and put on top of the gearbox. So they built some pretty interesting stuff. And they continue to do so through the 90s at least. So yes, Saab is a dead brand, but what's very much not dead is the community behind these cars and behind the spirit of these cars. Especially the old cars, because they were quirky and different. They united a lot of fans, a lot of people interested in the technical parts of these cars, and that is a community that kind of still holds strong to this very day. There are a bunch of online forums over multiple countries and even multiple continents that deal with only Saab maintenance, Saab repair. And having fixed the Saab before, I am kind of in that community already. So I know where to find my manuals, I know where to find my spare parts, I know where to ask questions, where to get help when I can't fix something myself. What's more, this community has had almost 30 years to make this car as fast as possible. So there's a lot of resource there on which ways to go down, which roads to take, what mods bring you what benefits, and to actually pave the way for a racing Saab. Another big benefit of the community is that the factory documentations, so the workshop information system and the spare parts catalog, digitally are available online for free. You can download it at zero cost and look into all the repair procedures, all the maintenance procedures, how to fix this, how to fix that in the official Saab workshop manual. That is a resource that is vital to a project like this, to any person fixing a Saab for themselves, and it's something that I think is very unique to the Saab community. Now, I talked about the interesting design choices that Saab made over the years, and in the 90s they had gotten to a very moderate level of that. The car I'm sitting on right here shares a platform with an Opel Vectra and an Opel Calibra from a similar year. What is unique to the Saab, however, is the engine and especially the engine management system. Saab employed its own design Trionic 5 system, which is basically a speed density system for measuring air mass and regulating combustion accordingly, which was for its time genuinely advanced. This in itself might not sound like much of an innovation, but what the system offered was a very unique way of detecting knock and regulating boost pressure accordingly. The red direct ignition cassette on the top of this engine is able to not only fire the spark plugs, but also detect when compression, combustion, and maybe knock might be happening. And as soon as it sees knock, the ECU will dial down ignition and fuel for this specific cylinder before it even touches the boost pressure. This makes it a very, very stable platform to build performance on, because the safety measurements to keep the engine alive, to keep it happy and healthy, are very rigorously implemented into the hardware of the system, basically. What makes the Trionic the secret weapon of this project, though, is mainly the fact that it is almost completely unlocked. Since Saab has been dead as a manufacturer for years, people had to get creative on how to modify and how to adjust their ECU tuning to hardware mods and other changes on the vehicle. So a dedicated group of free-time professionals, let's call them, have set about to actually unlock and develop a tuning tool for the stock Saab ECUs. So by downloading a free program from the internet that other people created, you can actually freely map the entire ECU by yourself. Now there are some software and some hardware requirements for that, but these range in the price point of around 200 euros and are very minimal in comparison to what a fully custom ECU and a tune for that would probably cost you. Also, spare electronics parts like spare ECUs, wiring looms, sensors are very readily available on the used aftermarket. You can get a used ECU to map and keep your stock one basically for around 50 euros, which is a very good price point. Well, above that, that's secret weapon number 2, is the engine itself. The engine in this car is a B204L engine designed and built by Saab themselves. They didn't put any Opel or GM engines that were available at the time into their cars and decided to design and build their own engines derived from earlier designs of their own making, basically. It is a 2-liter turbocharged inline 4-cylinder engine. It makes around 184 horsepower and 263 Newton meters from the factory. That in itself does not sound very impressive because it basically isn't, but that's just scratching the surface of what this engine can do and can be. First of all, because the software and the tuning is so easily mappable, you can adjust the software to hardware mods very easily and also cost effectively, making a turbo swap not also a daring endeavor in retuning the engine, but mainly a job of fitting the turbo and adjusting some values in the ECU accordingly. Beneath that, the motor itself is massively strong. It has a forged crank from the factory as well as forged rods. And there are people making like above 600 horsepower on these engine blocks, basically. If you want to check out Rochester's House of Boost, I will have linked him in the description below. He's building a Saab B204 race car, or he has built one or several, and he's achieving massive power numbers out of these blocks. The engines and their management system and everything about them are popular enough so that they are swapped regularly into Opels and other GM platforms. And funnily enough, there are even some BMW E36 or E46s documented to have been swapped with a B204 engine, or at least a Trionic management system. So yeah, the engine is basically indestructible and also a very good basis to build a track-capable power plant out of it. Everything bolted to the engine is less durable, however. The factory brakes were described in the 90s as mediocre, and also the suspension was not great for 90s standards. Also the gearbox, which is a GM F25 from the factory, is very far from bulletproof, especially if you start increasing engine torque and engine power. Seeing as we are trying to do that and also run it for maybe 24 hours non-stop, there are some improvements to be made there, definitely. How do I know that there might be gearbox problems on the Nordschleife? Well, let me tell you a little story. It is 1995. The 23rd 24-hour race at the Nürburgring is about to start. Among the 140 cars on the grid are 3 Saabs. 2 of them are 900 turbos, just like mine. On a side note though, the third Saab was a 9000 CS 2.3, not a factory entry, not a professional team, but built by Saab factory employees in their spare time. And then they drove it to the Nürburgring from Trollhättan in Sweden, which is about 1,500 kilometers on public roads. They took it racing for 24 hours, they finished the race, and after they did that, they drove it back. It's one of the most difficult and grueling endurance races to successfully compete in, and for them it was more like a weekend trip with the boys, which I find very, very amazing. Well, however, among the 2 900s competing, one was a race car built by renowned Saab tuner Abbott in England. The race went fairly well and without any technical issues, and they were competing for a place in the top 10 until an unlucky crash 23 hours in, and the subsequent tow to the paddock cost them their position. Well, the arguably most interesting part of Saab's motorsport history that year was the R900, Saab Germany's official race car converted from a twin brother of the very car I'm sitting on right now. It was built by a team from a Bochum-based Saab dealer in about 5 weeks. They modified the engine to produce about 285 horsepower, subsequently leading to them wrecking a gearbox when the Saab got off the track during the course of the race. They were plagued by electrical issues as well, leading to them finishing in 101st place. Among the drivers of this car was Volker Stutzek. He won the DTM in 1984, and he in fact is still racing, finishing first in his class in last year's Nürburgring 24, and he also competed in this year's event in an Opel Corsa of all cars. But This, however, can sadly not be said about Saab as a brand. After 1995, there were no further mentionable entries in the 24-hour race with any Saab, basically. That's the theory. Now let's take a look at what we actually have sitting here in this barn. Yes, that is a broomstick holding the bonnet open. It came with the car when I bought it. It was originally used to keep the trunk door open, but since I replaced the gas struts in the trunk, the bonnet ones have failed as well. So luckily I didn't throw it out and kept it as a bonnet strut. So this is our B204 engine, like I said. It has about 173,000 kilometers on the clock. And as you can see, it does have a slight oil leak here in the front and another one in the back that I can't really show because it's not very visible from here. Now, I did already replace most of the vacuum hoses. Put this cover off here. Also around the intake, and that actually made it idle a lot better because there were at least 2 broken hoses and a lot of them had probably slight air leaks. The air cleaner and battery have also already been replaced, but apart from that, the engine bay is pretty much sorted. Now, looking at the front of the car, there is a dent in the bumper, which is not only aerodynamically deficient, but mainly ugly. I will be looking at replacing these bumpers, depending on money conditions, probably. Front of the car looks decent otherwise. Moving further back, there is a slight issue with the windshield, mainly in the fact that it is actually not very secured to the vehicle at all. So this will probably need taking out, re-gluing, resealing before we can drive this thing anywhere on the road. I bought it in January this year, and I have since stripped the interior to get a better look at the floor pan. As you can see, it's pretty fucking filthy. That extension was actually in here, so somebody forgot it. We do have some slight rust issues. As you can see here, there is a rust hole in the floor pan, and funnily enough, an identical one symmetrically opposite to on the driver's side. Yeah, in typical Saab fashion, the ignition lock is in the middle of the car, which is a great gag if you tell somebody to drive a car and they don't even find the ignition lock. Also, funnily enough, the ignition lock is actually broken, so you can actually start the car with a screwdriver. Well, from the interior, I am sort of planning on removing all the dampening mats on the floor, mainly because there might be rust under them that I want to treat. Also because if we are going to convert this thing into a race car sometime, these need to come out anyways because they are dead weight, and dampening is nothing that you need in a race car. So that might be something we do early on before we put anything else back in, because now is the time to actually access that. As you can see, the dashboard's still in because I didn't want to mess with the airbags just yet. And there's still some floor mats because they are clamped behind the lower part of the dashboard, which is something I need to figure out and need to sort out on how to do. Climbing into the car, the rear strut towers basically have been covered by obviously a very technically savvy person into a layer of gunk and chassis glue that was, I mean, at least about this thick. I do not know why they did that. I can only suspect that there's probably some rust or some shitty welds hiding under that. So that will need taking care of, that will need cleaning out, looking at, and possibly repairs. But I mean, if we're welding the floor anyways, what's another shock mount to weld as well, right? As you can see, there is like slight surface corrosion on some of the panels in here, which I find kind of weird because like it's the inside of the car. How the hell does, like a seat mount, how the hell does it get so rusty? My best guess is actually that water just got into the vehicle, maybe via the not very well attached windshield, and started seeping through the carpets and getting moisture to the metal, which is also why those are kind of the deepest points in this car that do not have drains, which is also why they might have rotted out first. Now, this little control unit there is the central locking and immobilizer control unit. These things have a very useful immobilizer in the sense that it is very good at locking your ECU into not doing anything, basically. And since you tend to only get like one of the little clickers that unlocks it, yes, it does not unlock with the key, it does unlock with the remote control of the central locking. There is a good chance of you locking yourself out of your ECU, and then it's basically bricked then. So there is a need to fix that. I have sourced some spare parts. I have sourced some a spare control unit as well as extra clickers, but that's something we need to worry about later. So yeah, other than that, the back of the car is kind of okay-ish. The antenna broke off, but I don't know if I'm going to replace that. There's a lot of like slight surface corrosion going on everywhere, but I also need to check basically the seams of the wheel wells and the cargo floors. These tend to rust out very quickly, so I will probably remove the sealant there, check for rust, conserve it with something, and then just reseal it. Yeah, another issue might be the wiring loom of the rear hatch, because the third brake light is actually not working. I replaced the whole unit with a working one and it is still not doing anything. So yeah, we need to check the wiring harness. I am willing to bet that it's the flexible thingy up here where the wiring goes from the chassis to the hatch, and that's where it basically snapped because of fatigue. So yeah, what I can't really show you right now is the fact that the brakes are kind of rusted because it was sitting for a few years. The brakes tend to start to get sticky. I am actually already in the process of revising the brake calipers, giving them a coat of paint and new seals, new pistons and new guide pins mainly. So they do work flawlessly, at least the stock brakes. Like I said, the brakes in this car were not great from the factory, which is something that is okay on the road, but gets pretty dangerous pretty quickly on the track, of course. As you can see, wheels are of course also an issue, mainly because I am not gonna run on 15-inch steelies. There might be a brake upgrade, a bigger brake upgrade in the future, which requires at least 16-inch wheels. I am looking at 17 inches because I think those will be the best performance, looks, balance, basically. So yeah, we'll see about that when we get to it. I think for the initial phase, yeah, I mean, we'll see whether we stick to the series or not. What I also can't really show you right now is the fact that the exhaust is kind of rotten out on at least 3 places. It needs replacing. It's at least like I think 60% of the parts are done. So I might be looking at buying a new exhaust, or at least a good used one to put in there for the time being. A nice thing about the car is, however, that it came with lowering springs installed already. It is about 35 millimeters lower, which is a good track height, I think, for this one. We might switch to a different front bumper, which brings the nose down even lower than this one, as well as side skirts accordingly. So the springs can actually stay, and they're also in the paperwork already, which is great. Now, looking at our little plan we made, for the GLP, which is the first stage of the game we're getting into, the car needs to be street legal. To be street legal and to be registered in my name at the local DMV, basically, this car needs to get a safety inspection. To pass the safety inspection, a lot of things like brakes, exhaust, and especially the brake light are mandatory. So these things need fixing first. The very first and foremost goal the next few weeks and the next few videos will be to get this car actually back on the road and get it legally registered to be driven as a road car, and then to start to take it to the GLP and see how it performs on track. I may want to look into upgrades we can make already, especially the brakes, which are able to be legally put into the paperwork of the car or do not matter for the paperwork of the car. So yeah, we'll see about that. I am gonna tell you when I know what mods might be happening in the future. So if you want to see how we get this piece of rust back on the road and actually get it race ready, get it ready for its first laps of the Nürburgring, then stay tuned. Leave a like, leave a sub, and see ya.